is revisiting a plan, and you guide me, Mr. Peters, which was announced initially in 2015, thereabout.
Yes, you're correct, Shannon. The issue of the Gros Islet Highway, obviously, it's the major corridor of the island between the capital and the touristic north of the island, and also an area where you have the largest population center.
Yeah.
So it is, in fact, a very critical piece of infrastructure that requires attention. And you're correct that there have been various design initiatives and approaches by the government over the various periods and administration. Each one, I would say, over the last 20 years, have attempted with various interventions so far.
Yeah.
I think we have now to situate the entire project within the fiscal challenges that we are facing as a country and begin to look at the project, I would say, in a staged construction approach, whereby you progressively engage in various interventions until such time
we have the capacity.
You would have had.
Until such time we would have our capacity financially and economically to do a grander project.
That's correct, yeah.
I want to talk in detail about the various options that have been touted, but let's go back a bit, because as you said, it's important thoroughfare, it's an important roadway. Some 24,000 plus vehicles traverse there daily when the last study was done. You also did a study which looked at various options, and I want to start by there, because December is upon us, and that would signal another anniversary of the Grand Castries Transportation Study, which you were engaged in many Decembers back, looking at the various options for addressing the bottlenecks on the Castries Highway. What did the study consider then, and then we progress from there?
Right. Well, the study really focused on, I would say, primarily from cul-de-sac, and it went right up to, let's say, just beyond Shock, although there was, in fact, some engagement further up. And coming out of that particular study, we would have had the Millennium Highway was one project that came out of it. That Castries Inner Relief Road, which is that section where the old Ministry of Works building was located, that is connecting Hospital Road to Manuel Street. That was one initiative that came out with that new bridge constructed close to Slatford. That's the second one. The study also looked at parking in Castries as a principal issue of transportation engineering required within the city. And also, there was, in fact, consideration of a road that would have traversed from VG intersection and would go to the back of Peter and Company, the back of M&C, and come out by the Castries Comprehensive School. And the intent then was to allow all of those businesses to access from the back and thus free up the sort of conflicts that you had in the existing section. That initiative got into some snags because of land ownership towards the back and plans for hotel development. And therefore, it was decided that we would have to look at that section from VG to Shock as a separate exercise within the existing corridor. The first initiative in the ministry, which I was then part of, was to widen to 3 lanes. In fact, the first initiative was having 3 lanes, it was 2 coming down or 2 going up. I can't recall what it was, but it was a 3-lane road. And then later on, in that period of 97 to 2002, I believe, there were plans then to widen it to the 4-lane that we have there now.
Yes.
And so that initiative, I would say to you, would have been the conclusion of those plans that were created coming out of the Grand Castries Transportation Study. So where we have to go now is to refresh that initiative, that plan. I think we need to go back and do another study looking at that section, I would say from Shock going up to the north, but with the intent of creating, as I said, a stage construction approach, dealing with some of the intersections that exist now. I think there are some easy win situations there that we can do, widening, creating holding lanes. And what I would suggest to the government is that to look at that as the first option before you get into any extensive exercise of moving to 4 lanes. Because in my view, moving to 4 lanes is an expensive land acquisition and property acquisition initiative. And if you drive on the road and you want to create 4 workable lanes, and I call them workable lanes, that you would require a significant amount of property acquisition along that route. And I'm talking that it can reach probably to the tune of almost $1 billion of property acquisition costs.
Yeah, just in land acquisition, which would far surpass any engineering costs, any consultancy fees, just the acquisition of land. And many St. Lucians are familiar with the highway. Just driving the highway from the Almond Hotel up, you have land acquisition challenges on both sides, which makes the project extremely expensive, as you say. In your estimation, at least $1 billion minimum in land acquisition only.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying is the challenge. I mean, we can talk about a 4 lane and the niceties associated with that creation. But the actual reality on site, and if you drive the road, it's not difficult for you to envisage what will be the sort of land acquisition that is required. Just think of the existing road, which is probably the correct size of a lane. Double that, include a median, and include 2 shoulders, and think about the sort of land space that is required on either side, coming from Shock and going into the Rodney Bay area. And I think that once you begin to look at it from that perspective, the question is then, can the country afford that level of expenditure in land acquisition and property acquisition? And that is even before you can start any construction activity. So I really want to caution, if that is a proper word to use, to caution the government to look at the holistic cost of that intervention and to really begin to think in the direction of a stage construction approach. Look at I would say, the easy wins that we can create. Look again at how those interventions would have impacted upon the entire network, and then we progressively go forward as to what other interventions we need.
A little later, I want you to come in, Mr. Peters, on the international standard in terms of the dimensions, lane and shoulder dimensions for construction of such a highway, to give people an appreciation of the feasibility really from a technical perspective on it. But the Grand Castries study, and just 2 more from me on that study as we progress, it provided some 27 strategies for addressing the issues along the corridor, Shock to Gros Islet. We won't have time to go through all of them, but in essence, the concept was to try to create diversions away from the main corridor, the main highway, through back roads, sort of to make it more attractive and to have people access the back roads. Was that the intention and the thought from that study?
Well, all right. I it's important that we discuss that first comment you made with regards to what is an acceptable width of a corridor. If you drive along the existing section between VG and Shock, if any heavy goods vehicle is in front of you, you realize that heavy goods vehicle moves towards the center of the road, and you have no possibility of overtaking any heavy goods vehicle traveling along that section. And that is a factual experience that anybody that's driving along the highway would have experienced. So it means that even the existing corridor between Shock and VG is a compromise design. And that compromise design came about primarily because of the land acquisition issues and the impact it would have had on the cost of the project. So they attempted to stay as much as possible within the existing reserve. There were some property acquisitions. For example, the Faith Baptist Church was demolished, and they got some space there by the Castries Comprehensive School. But by and large, there was not any significant land take. When they reached if you recall also, when we reached at Sandals, there was that whole issue because Sandals was, I understand, was not willing to have any significant land take on their property side. And there was that little narrowing of the corridor at that point in time, which was subsequently, there was some expansion done, but still a compromise lane. So the point that you're making is important, because if you have a situation where you have that continuation of a compromised design from VG right up to the Gros Islet area, you may end up in a situation where you may have created a worse scenario than what you intended to do. And the impact of the intervention would have been significantly diminished because of the fact that you are engaging in a compromised design. So all of these factors are important in coming up with solutions, workable solutions, economic solutions, cost-effective solutions in dealing with that section of the highway that is remaining to be looked at.
Talk about the options of making the back roads a lot more sexy, so people can utilize and drive traffic away from the main highway.
My understanding of the initiative that was proposed and that was supposed to be funded by the Creative Fund was that the first activity would have been dealing with what we call the back roads. And the reason for that was that because the work on the highway created such high levels of displacement, there would have been a requirement to push the traffic through the back roads while the construction activity was ongoing. So the thinking was, let us improve all of the access roads that are off the highway, let them be the principal routes to be used during the construction of the main works on the Gros Islet highway, and therefore you would have had minimized the disruption of traffic along that particular route, and in the process would have created an enhanced network that would have helped you anyway in terms of the traffic management to the north of the island. I think the back roads are important, and I would want to suggest probably then that we pursue the initiative of the back roads simultaneously with looking at the short-term, let's say the first stage interventions along the Gros Islet highway. I think that package of activities may be the best approach to go forward with.
Yeah, just for clarity, Mr. Peters, can you recall the extent of the QAT funding at that time in 2015? It was in the range of 150 million, correct?
Yeah, Sharon, I believe it would be those sort of numbers. And as I said, the error that was made in putting forward those numbers would have been, and if you're looking at a project cost, would have been the inclusion of the property acquisition and land acquisition, because it is a cost to the project. And it would have been interesting to find out, when those numbers were floated, what would have been then the cost of property acquisition, and also what would have been the subsequent cost of the project. And I want to believe that it would have been an astronomical figure if the property acquisition was included in the construction cost as a project sum.
As you say, it appears, if you look at it from on paper, and if you look at it on design, it looks good. It'd be nice to have a four-lane highway. It would make the flow of traffic easier, obviously. But when you look at the technical challenges in terms of the land acquisition, one, and in terms of international standards or specification, design specification, two, it really looks a bit cloudy for us as a small island.
And so if you look at the concepts, if you go back to design concepts, the section from VG to Shock, what essentially is happening there is that you're limiting the conflicts along that route. So if you're coming up from the north, you would realize that from the time you leave VG, going up to the north, the only areas that you would have traffic crossing over would be at the Sunny Acres roundabout, and that will be the only area where you have traffic from one lane traversing, or one lane traversing onto the other lane. So everyone that is on the western side, if you're traveling up to the north, if you're on the western side, everyone in that area would have to move towards one of the roundabouts to go back down into Castries. And so that is the concept. The concept is minimizing that conflict, those conflicts that you have when you have movement from one side of a road to the other side of the road. So that the four-lane highway would also involve having to deal with that, create your medians, confine most of the traffic into one side of the road, and if you start thinking about the number of intersections, and my last count was that you have 48 intersections combined from the Shock Junction. If you go from Shock right up to the Montgiro Hill, you roughly have 48 junctions, roughly 24 on either side, that you have to deal with. So that is another issue that has to be considered.
That's roughly how many to your estimation? Roughly how many?
There are roughly 48 intersections.
48.
Roughly 24 on either side between the Shock Junction and going right up to the Montgiro Hill.
Yeah, it'd be interesting some of your recommendations in addressing that, because it obviously creates a bottleneck. Holding lanes, slip lanes, what do you think can work there, which may appear to be lower hanging fruit and less costly? Mr. John Peters will rejoin us shortly on the Flow video line. We're talking infrastructure this morning. As we wait for Mr. Peters to rejoin, Danley, let's go to that Kareem Nelson report, the updates from the Member of Parliament for Gros Islet, Kenson Kazimi, who really was the one who made the announcement on behalf of the government of St. Lucia that they would be revisiting the four-lane highway construction from Shock to Gros Islet, a project initially. We will reconnect with Mr. Peters shortly. A project initially envisioned and presented by former Prime Minister Dr. Kenny D. Anthony back in 2015. Kenson Kazimi has since announced that the current administration plans to go ahead with constructing a four-lane highway from Shock to Gros Islet.
In 2015, former Prime Minister and Minister for Finance Dr. Kenny D. Anthony received parliamentary authorization to borrow $30 million from the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development. This loan was to be used to finance the Shock Bay Gros Islet Road and secondary roads improvement project. The following year, in 2016, the Dr. Anthony-led administration lost the elections to the United Workers' Party under the leadership of Alain Chastanet. According to then Minister for Infrastructure Stephenson King, the loan was cancelled and the project scrapped, contrary to his advice. In 2021, however, a modified four-lane highway project was revisited by the UWP administration and a subcontract was given to a company named Fresh Start to commence works on the upper portion of the road in Rodney Heights. The works included the installation of pipelines. However, several concerns about the legitimacy of the contract award process resulted in the halting of the project until an audit was completed. Now, in 2022, 6 years after the project was initially tabled, the Labour Party administration has reopened negotiations with Kuwait to fund the reconstruction of the highway. According to King, the lack of succession planning is to be blamed for the cancellation of the first contract that he believes caused a major delay in an important national project.
The Castries Gros Islet Highway, when the UWP won in 2016, the Labour Party had already negotiated the reconstruction, redevelopment of the Castries Gros Islet Highway. A loan was approved together with a grant to do the reconstruction of the Castries Gros Islet Highway from the Shock Bridge to Gros Islet. It was immediately stopped against my own advice that we should proceed with the road to improve the traffic flow and the congestion between Castries and Gros Islet.
Meanwhile, MP for Gros Islet, Kenson Casimir, who himself frequents the highway, says he is aware that the Minister for Infrastructure has been working to jumpstart the project and is hopeful that it comes to fruition.
The only thing I can say is that I'm thrilled that the conversation continues with the Kuwaiti government as it pertains to a four-lane highway on the Julian Hunt Highway from Shock all the way to Cap Estate. As far as I know, the Minister of Infrastructure has been dealing with this thing almost daily so that we can get some reprieve for the persons who drive on that highway. I myself frequent that area, and the traffic, as we know, could be a bit frustrating, and so this government has been committed from day one to ensure that we have better traffic on the Castries Julian Hunt Highway.
Sources close to the project have indicated that an agreement was to be signed between the St. Lucian government and the Kuwait government at the end of August. However, the details are still being finalized before the project can commence.
Daniela Edwin with that report. We're now joined by Mr. John Peters, former Chief Engineer, Mr. John Peters. Before we lost you, Mr. Peters, we were talking about the low-hanging fruit, the options that are less costly to address the 48 access points along the highway, 48 junctions, if you may, along the highway. And then I want to quiz you on some of the. I don't know if you're following that news report there, but then I'll quiz you. You're very much familiar with the project. I'll quiz you on some of the points raised there. But your recommendation, some of the low-hanging fruit which can make the problem a lot closer to a resolution.
Of that particular road, if you start looking at where are the major intersection points, you would come up with the Troya area is one. You have also that section between Computer World, that spin-off there that has created more problems than solutions, because what is happening is that people are taking that road either through Corinth or coming down through Renard Gases, and then coming back out between Computer World, hopefully in their minds that they're reducing their travel time.
Yeah.
But what it does is that it creates more problems for those that stay on the highway, as it were. So that's a critical point. Then all of the businesses that are major generators of traffic, you have to look at that. That will be cost, will be one. Going further up, you were talking about M&C, the gas stations, SNS. So those who drive on the road, from the time you cross that SNS area, you realize that there's an acceleration on the road, that you can move a lot faster going up to Moshi.
Yeah.
So what I would suggest is that we look at those major points of
entry and
access
exit.
onto
Yeah,
the
access, yeah. Let's take them one by one.
Let's go one by one.
Let's take them one by one.
Right. So we leave Shock, we come up the hill.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have any major issues there. You have a hotel, St. James Club, but you can only turn off the highway into St. James Club. You come up to the brow of the hill, and you'll notice there's a slowing down from that point.
Mm-hmm.
If you drive further on, you realize that your first major flow into the highway would be at the Marisol Junction. So that's a major point. That current junction is a major point. As you go further, the impacts with regards to the courts, depending on the time of the day, you'll find that courts also becomes a point of concern. The Troya Junction, the junction Computer World, and you have that replace X starting. And then when you go further, you would then have M&C, which is limited. Then you have SNS, that is a major generator of traffic onto the highway. And then as you drive along, you realize that by the time you pass SNS and M&C, going to Rasco, you have an acceleration going up the hill.
Yeah.
Traffic is lessened because obviously you have less conflict. And then you reach the top of the hill at Montgiro, you get a slowdown again, and that is because of the impact that you have created by the Rodney Bay Junction area there, which you have two major malls there, major shopping centers, banking, tourism areas there. So that is a major point also that has to be considered, which I understand the intervention of the last administration attempted to look at that. Whether it is the best approach may be subject to debate, but that area also is a major point of conflict.
Yeah. So I want to, and thanks for that, we will talk about Rodney Bay in as a separate shortly, but let's talk about the major ones. Let's start at SNS. What can work there that's low hanging in your humble opinion?
If you widen that area and you have the space to widen it, create a holding lane to get into on both sides, a holding lane to get into the shopping area. That may accelerate some of or that may help in some of the movement of traffic from that particular point.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you go down, I would cut off that section between Computer World and Brian Dyer's building. I think that section creates more problems than the right solution. So if you want to get to the back of Current, there is that road that was built when they were constructing the bridge.
Right.
It goes there. The culvert that is presently across the river, I would block off that section of the road so you cannot enter
the highway
between that section onto the highway.
Because that's a major bottleneck there.
Major bottleneck that should not have been when they had, because the activity to the back was basically to provide a relief road when that bridge was being constructed by Sunbuild. That area was a temporary access, and it should not have become a permanent access onto the highway. Because of the width of the junction, you have all sort of activities going on at that particular point. And I really think that a simple solution, and what the ministry can do is do a trial, close off that road between the hours of 7 to 10, and let's see what impact it creates in that regard. But I think as a trial, the ministry could probably shut off that section of the road and see what impact it has on travel times to the north of the island.
Yeah. That way you force, you limit the conflict that's always happening at that intersection. Look to the opposite end of the road. You have Windjammer. There is minimal conflict there. What would you do to lessen it?
But similarly, again, widening, creating holding lanes, try and and have a scenario where if you want to turn in or turn out, you can hold and not cause the entire backlog of traffic.
Okay.
The thing about traffic management and traffic engineering, Shannon, is that it is possible to take some of the concepts of chaos theory and apply it to transportation engineering. And what chaos theory says basically is that if, and we see it, for example, there are times you would have seen an accident on the highway. The accident, the cars have been removed and are placed at the shoulder of the highway. But yet still, you have a significant backlog of traffic. And the reason for that is that everyone that passes slows down, looks across the road, see whether or not is their friend or partner that is involved in the accident, and that slight slowdown of traffic cumulatively causes a delay, probably sometimes a mile, 2 miles up the road. And that is in essence what chaos theory applied to transportation engineering is all about. How the slowing down of one vehicle can create that ripple effect, and the process of delays on the highway going forward.
Yeah. And we see a lot of that happening. We see a lot of that happening along our Castries, Sir Julian R. Hunter Highway now called. We see a lot of that.
I mean, I think it is a case study in the application of the chaos theory into transportation engineering. Really, it's something that can become a very interesting case study.
Yeah. If I'm following you, Mr. Peters, I think what you're saying, road widening, perhaps the slip and the holding lane would be can work the same for the new Saul junction that has been created, the one immediately opposite leading to that community there as well, the Court St. Lucia junction, an entrance and exit as well. The same can work there. The Tuia one as well, if you go up. It might be a different solution for the Granivia-Corinth intersection there. What do you think can work?
Yeah, but I know that at one point in time there was some engagement with the possibility of a roundabout at that section. I don't know if it can work. It might be able to work. But I think the study should look at that junction and look and see what can be done in terms of interventions at that particular point. But the analysis really should be isolated and a focus first upon, as I said, stage construction as an initiative to be pursued, and then progressively build your infrastructure over a period of time.
Yeah.
Don't try and eat everything at the same time. Yeah. I think we have two problems. We have a historical problem that we need to fix in the country of implementation of large projects. And if you look at every large project over the last 25 years in St. Lucia, all have failed. Every single large project that the government has pursued,
I was just putting
has been a failure.
Just sticking that pin, I was just about to tell you, public, you'd like to say every large public project, there have been some very successful large private projects.
Well, I said projects done by the government.
You did. Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
You did.
But we have a serious implementation problem, and you just have to look throughout the island. And if you go to Dennery, Barjoli, go up on the top of the Barjoli Hill, and you look at what was supposed to be the Dennery Polyclinic up on there. It is the personification, and in other words, it is the articulation of implementation chaos that we find on top of there. That after almost 9 years or more from conceiving the project, from going to the World Bank to getting a loan, to going out to tender, to going out to tender again, and the project now virtually has been abandoned, as far as I understand.
Similarly, with a number of these projects, a number of these infrastructure projects, the UK SIF, CDB funded Millennium Highway has been on the cards for well close to 2 decades now, mind you, after it was initiated and gifted to the Caribbean by former UK Prime Minister David Cameron. But let's zoom back. I don't know, and I want to go to some more of the hot button issues on this highway and this proposed project. But are you willing, Mr. Peters, to give us, in your humble opinion, an estimate that you think is realistic for us to do some of those low-hanging interventions along the highway?
I would say that let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I would say that $5 million intervention can do some significant impact upon the Gros Islet Highway. Yeah, I think so. I think 5 million, as low as 5 million, can create, with certain interventions, can create a significant impact upon the travel time on that particular road.
Yeah. I know one of your recommendations would make serious headway. That junction in between Computer World and Mr. Dyer's building, if you just shut it off and not allow persons to access the highway there, you'd have significant improvement. Our phone lines are open at 4500-777. You can call us up live and ask Mr. Peters a question and come in on the discussion as well. 4500-777. The number to call. Let's go back with me now, Mr. Peters. In 2015, the former Prime Minister sought parliamentary approval, and he received parliamentary approval for that funding from the Kuwaitis. $30 million it was at that time. There was also a grant component to it. The Prime Minister, Dr. Anthony, was also touting funding from the OPEC fund. You recall that?
Yeah. Well, the Kuwait fund and the OPEC fund have some interface because they also were the ones that funded the Millennium Highway, and I was part of the negotiations with the Kuwaiti fund. So they always have that connectivity with the OPEC fund. Okay.
Right. So he received authorization from the Parliament to loan the first set of funds, $30 million, and there was a grant component there. The election came in 2016. Would it be fair to say that the project at that stage was ready to go, ready for implementation?
I would say that if you consider the issue of land acquisition, then I would have, if I were in the government at the time, or I would advise to them, I would have proceeded with the phase that dealt with the back roads. Because I don't think that I'm not aware of any exercise that was related to the property acquisition and land acquisition along that particular section of the highway. I may be wrong, but if you were going to start the project, then it would have meant that you would have also carried out that exercise in property acquisition along that route. And to the best of my knowledge, that was not done. So in terms of readiness of the project, specifically in relation to the Gros Islet Highway, I would want to say that because that preliminary work, or that work that is a predecessor, was not done, then I would conclude that the project was not ready, or that component of the project was not ready. I would say that if the concept was to start with the back roads, as we call them, first of all, then that section of the works would have been ready at that point in time and should have been pursued. I think that we need to be very careful when we get grants and low interest loans from various funding agencies. I think various administrations, or all administrations, must be very careful in how you deal with those grants and how you deal with those low interest loans. Right? You shouldn't throw away those opportunities that are presented to you. When you have a grant, when you have a low interest loan, you have to seize it and make good use of it. And I think that was a mistake from the last government.
But some of those grants and loans you'd appreciate, and you'd welcome as well, Mr. Peter. They come with conditionalities as well. Sometimes the donor wants you to put certain things in place before you can utilize the funding, and if it is not in conformity with those conditions, The monies aren't really released.
Shannon,
And there's also next consideration, Mr. Peter. If you only had 30 million, without the proper full analysis, was your words then, in 2015, you cautioned that there should be full analysis. Those were your exact words before. If you only had 30 million, you haven't done the study for land acquisition. Does it really make sense to begin to expend 30 million not knowing what it is you're fully looking into?
But as I said, Shannon, the $13 million, I would have diverted it fully to the back road.
Okay, fair enough.
Right? And maximize on the improvement of those roads, because those roads are very critical to the infrastructure of the island.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And on the question of grants, let me say this to you. I mean, I was fortunate in 1994 or so to have been part of a team that went to a World Bank meeting, and I remember sitting in one of the offices of the World Bank together with Sir John and meeting the Kuwait Director General, the Kuwait Fund Director General, and that was to the funding of the Millennium Highway. And I would say to you that what I found interesting from the Kuwaitis is that they feel offended if you don't come back to them for a second loan. If you take one loan and you disappear, they are offended that you have not returned for a second loan. And it may be a cultural issue with them, but they appreciate a country that comes a second time for a second loan.
You can understand why they're loaning you money.
They're rolling the money too. But the whole aspect of the Kuwait Fund coming to the Caribbean was really to show appreciation and thanks for the support that all the Caribbean countries gave during the Kuwaiti War. And I remember very distinctly them very appreciative that St. Lucia stood up in the UN and supported Kuwait when they were invaded by the Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein. So they were very, very appreciative that a small country like St. Lucia stood up for them at that critical point in their history.
And there's some value, in diplomacy for us to show some reciprocity as well. If they've extended a favor, there's some value in returning to the table once the terms continue to remain favorable for you.
And I would hope that this government will start the discussion. Let us look at the low-hanging fruits, as I call them, on the Gros Islet Highway. Let us take the Kuwait Fund, OPEC Fund grant, push it on to the back roads, get those back roads in top condition. And I think between those interventions on the Gros Islet Highway combined with the improvement on the back roads, a lot of the problems that we have now on the Gros Islet Highway will be diminished.
And we're not talking hundreds of millions of dollars, which I don't think the Kuwaitis themselves may be in a position, given the global climate, to loan anybody right now.
That's correct. And you're correct too, that the reshaping of the thinking should also be dovetailed into the realities, the present realities. And the present realities are that most countries now are moving towards a recession, and the sort of funding that you would have been able to get for these mega projects, they're not there at all at this point in time. So you really have to look at the fiscal realities and the global trends at this point in time, create your project within that framework.
Thanks for that. We've looked at the low-hanging fruits along the main corridor. You say you would utilize once you've been able to re-engage the Kuwaitis. We're told that, and you have a history with the Kuwaitis, Mr. Peters, so I'm sure that you'd be able to jumpstart that in quick time. But we understand, and we're told that the infrastructure minister is speaking daily with the Kuwaitis according to his cabinet colleague to try to jumpstart that project. So we'll see how long he takes to do so. Once the funding is available, you say let's fix some of the back roads. Significant upgrade has already happened. Mondador to Balata, Corinth, Grand Riviere, even that road from the Castries Gros Islet Highway in through, leading it into Morshy, not the Vesique. The Larry Tret Road has been done as well, and several others in Babonneau. Which others would you
Larry Tret still needs some attention.
Yeah.
But what Larry Tret?
Larry
Tret has not. There was some other Larry Tret. The Vesique one, I'm sorry.
Obviously, Vesique needs some major upgrades. Major.
Yeah.
And it's an important road as well.
Yeah, and I think there's also a road from that area that goes down to Asu Canal.
Yeah.
I think you should also look at improving that road so that you can either come down into Corinth or head through and go to Grand Riviere. But I think that is also a road that should be looked at.
Yeah, so those are two critical ones to your opinion. Any more that strikes you that can make some significant impact? The back roads we still talking? John Peters is still with us. He will reconnect now.
Well, I recall under the...
Continue, sir.
Yeah. Under the transportation study, I think we had also looked at one joining Union to Balata. Balata around there. But I'll have to think again. I'll have to relook at that again. But there was some, I recall there was some discussion that we had in creating a new link road from Union heading into the Castries area. But I would not venture into that at this point in time. I think the major road that we should look at, well, no. Let me include also that road from Larry Tret, going up to Morshy, coming down to Deramo, back into Plateau.
Yeah.
I think you should look at that one also as an important link road.
Yeah.
So that because right now, if you are living in Bonte, I can leave Bonte and reach the Castries without touching the Gros Islet Highway. And I think that's also an important one. That road coming up into Deramo, into Plateau. They have done work in Plateau already, going back into Babonneau. I think that is also an important link road.
Yeah.
And just in essence, the idea is create as many opportunities
to get people
within
the
the network for people to move into Castries. And I think that general concept is what should be pursued.
Yeah, and when you make it accessible and user-friendly and safe, drivers will go there. They will utilize those roads, and there is significant evidence. People don't want to sit in the highway traffic for too long. John Peters is here with us, former chief engineer. We're talking infrastructure this morning, particularly what's been proposed for the Castries Gros Islet Highway. The government has announced that it intends to revisit plans for construction of a 4-lane highway from Shock up to the Kappa State, according to the Gros Islet MP. Mr. Peters, let's go further north for a while. The Rodney Bay Road Rehabilitation Project, you're quite familiar with it as well. It appears to be on hold. I wouldn't say abandoned, but it has been stopped pending a review, which was announced several months ago. No feedback on the contents of that review. What did you see happening there? Your analysis, assessment of what was happening at Rodney Bay.
Well, just for correction, my understanding is that in fact the contractor terminated the contract. And not the other way around, as far as I am aware. But that particular section of road, or let me say, those works that were done there, I mean, I have expressed my views on it personally. The contract was a design build finance. That was the initial conceptualization. It was a design build finance.
So the contractor, just for clarification, because not everybody knows the lingual, the contractor would design it, he would build it, he would finance it, and then we would repay him, and then we would repay him.
Yeah, and I think it was that you would have been repaid over 5 years, upon completion of the project. When you engage in a design, finance, construct arrangement, under the law, the contractor has to build that particular activity as a fit-for-purpose level. And the fit-for-purpose is a legal term that is very important to understand.
Yeah.
It means that whatever was the purpose of the particular construction activity, the end product must be fit for that particular purpose. So if you have been asked as a contractor to design, construct, or to design, construct, forget the financing for now, because the financing is a separate component.
Yeah.
If you have to design and construct a warehouse for a particular developer, and after you have designed the warehouse, the forklifts that you were told will be utilized within the particular structure
Cannot fit.
the forklift cannot enter the building and cannot function within the building, then the developer can take that particular contractor to court in a cause of action, a tortious cause of action. So it means that when you engage in a design construct activity, you're held to a higher level of responsibility deemed fit for purpose. So let's go to that particular section of the road, right? The government engaged the contractor to design, finance, construct an intervention, I call it intervention, a traffic intervention, a transportation engineering intervention, that will improve the traffic flows from the north of the island, Castries area, through the Rodney Bay area, down into Castries. So the intent and the purpose of the intervention was to improve your traffic between that Castries area, Bonte area, through the Rodney Bay area, going southward.
Just hold on, Mr. Peters. Just hold on for me. You may have broadened the scope a bit. Wouldn't it be fair to say that the intention would have been to address the bottleneck at the Rodney Bay? At the Rodney Bay? Because if you're going to tie the legal requirements for design, finance, build to the deliverables being in accordance with what the outcome was originally supposed to be, wasn't it an intent to address that bottleneck at Rodney Bay and not generally
so what I'm saying, Sharon, is the traffic that is coming from the north of Rodney Bay will be able to travel through that Rodney Bay area and exit, let's say by Volney gas station then, the old Volney gas station, exit there. So yes, that section of the road, which obviously is, we all agreed, you have two major shopping centers, high concentrations of traffic. You have a bank in there, you have commercial enterprises, you have restaurants, you have 3 hotels, 4 hotels. So that area was the concern, and your intervention was trying to deal with that and to allow traffic to have a better flow through that section, as it were, going south. Yeah. So the first intervention, the first design, in fact, showed that they were going to put 2 roundabouts, one where MGI, the entrance to MGI, which is the Railway Park area, Railway Park, Railway Orchard, in fact, and Rodney Heights. And the other one was somewhere down by where the present one is being built. So if you look at the first design that was submitted and the first design that the ministry accepted, was a design which called for a roundabout at MGI and a roundabout at Rodney Bay area there.
Yeah, if you know where there are the 2 military columns,
the 2 military,
take you right at the military columns, it would have gone there.
Military outpost.
Yes.
And the MGI entrance.
Yes.
Ready, Orchard, Rodney Bay Heights.
Yeah.
When they started it, and I was observing because I travel up to the north regularly, they attempted to set out the roundabout at the MGI junction and realized, and I was a bit confused that they didn't realize it before, they realized that the junction could not work at that particular place.
It couldn't work because of...
So the roundabout could not work.
It couldn't work because of what? Space? Why?
Space-wise, yeah. Space-wise was one of the factors.
MGI.
And when they had set it out, I guess they realized that they would have had to go into the road by the gardens in order to create the sort of geometry for a functional roundabout.
Let me come in for a while, Mr. Peters, because I'm familiar with that particular project. Wearing a different hat then.
Oh yes, I forget you.
When it was initially proposed, it was open up to consultation, internal and external as well. One of the very first things, the second roundabout by MGI, I'll tell you, Frank, it was rejected by the residents of that Ridgeway Orchard community. It was rejected by them. They were of the opinion that it would have generated too much traffic into their community and made their own living and access options a lot worse. So they didn't want to have it. The infrastructure minister then, who still...
That doesn't make much sense anyway.
That was what they...
A roundabout cannot create more traffic into an area.
Because one of the... And you, the engineer, Mr. Peters, one of the legs or arms, how do you call it? How do you call it? The exits of the roundabouts. What's the term used for it? Is it a leg? What's it called?
The exit?
Yeah, the exit.
Make a point.
But what's it called? Give me the engineering term.
The exit lane?
No, the exits of a roundabout. Like down at VG, we have at least 4 of them. What do they call it? An arm or foot? No.
Let's use the word arm.
Let's use the word arm. One of the main arms for that proposed roundabout would have gone straight into the Ridgeway community. So the residents thought that it would have generated too much traffic for them and complicated their own access to the highway and to their homes. So they rejected it. The former, infrastructure minister then, who is the minister still now as well, did make the suggestion, why not shift it higher up where you're already building, fixing the back road into not Larry Tret, but yeah, into Larry Tret. He pointed that it was a suggestion that he also made. So I just wanted to put that in there as a caveat to say that it did come out of consultation that proposed initial design at MGI perhaps is not the best thing, or would not have been the best option. But you can continue.
Yeah, all right, okay. But I will still want to suggest that even with the objections of the residents for the proposed concept, I do not think that you have sufficient space to create a functional roundabout in that location anyhow.
You are the engineer, I accept it.
Let me go alone.
Yeah.
All right. So you have that, and then as you said, well, you provided the clarification there. The second iteration then became moving it to the that Kilago Larry Tret junction. Yeah. All right. So we had that ongoing. There were drainage works done. There were sidewalks created in the process of time. There was some expansion of that particular road. As I said, my looking in on the material that was used for the widening, I do not believe that material will meet acceptable standards for construction of base. It may struggle to become an acceptable base, a sub-base, but from what I saw, the material was used right up to base level. So that was one of my concerns in terms of the quality of material used for the expansion of the roadway. But yeah, I mean, the question is that the government has to complete the works that are there. I don't think you can leave it abandoned for any extended period of time. But there will be some costs associated with restarting the work, and whether or not what has been created so far on the first roundabout by the railway park, whether that is in fact, the best geometry for roundabout at that particular point. Right now we have the sidewalks that are the same level as the roofs of the houses in railway park at that point. All of us who drive the road were a bit confused. 1 minute the drains were at a lower level. Next minute they were being raised to one level. Then they were again raised to a higher level. So there was a lot of confusion as to what really was the design along that particular road. And all I can hope is obviously taxpayers' funds have been utilized in the construction, or will be utilized in the construction, because we have to pay the contractor at some point in time. I would want to hope that at the end of the day, the ministry can integrate what is there, and we can have some value created by the particular transportation intervention. That's my hope.
Let's talk about integrating what's there. Kilago roundabout, you're saying it perhaps is well positioned because there is room for expansion for the business community as well, and it leads you to a properly upgraded back road. So according to you, it's well situated there. You're not too sure about the other one up at the military columns, the proposed one there. But how would you integrate?
In terms of the geometry.
Yeah, I understand. How would you integrate what's already there into a solution to our traffic problems along the roadway?
Well, John, I am wondering whether it may make more sense just keeping it as two wide lanes and a shoulder, as against trying to create two-lane traffic for a particular section and then having to bring it back into one lane. I think we have seen what happens in that scenario, and those of us who recall the section of the highway before that widening by Sandals, there was always that funneling effect because of the fact that we had to move from two lanes into one lane.
It might be different there.
I am not sure.
It might be different there because if you go past Kilago where the second roundabout is created,
I'm coming down.
You're coming down. So let's just stay up for a bit. Kilago end, you have that bridge which can accommodate a four-lane movement of traffic.
Yeah,
you have that
I'm talking about the other end. I'm talking
let's go
about the end
by Volney.
By Volney, yes. Where you have now, because that is the direction in which you have your higher flows of traffic. When you're moving into two lanes, coming down back into one lane, at that point by Volney is there, you're going to create that funnel effect.
Yeah, but perhaps...
And I'm not too certain whether...
I was going to go there. I was just starting up at the Bonte end first. I was going to come down to the Volney end.
Okay, fine. Let's come down, yeah.
And you, from very early on, you proposed a phased approach to everything that's happening there. Perhaps the Rodney Bay is one phase. And when you get to the Volney end, it's an easier option for widening there. Less land acquisition along there, heading down into the Moshi Hill area. So that can perhaps be a second phase.
Yeah, but the present design, as soon as you leave the roundabout, you come back into single lane. So even before you reach Volney, you are single lane.
Okay, I follow you.
Yeah.
I follow you.
I mean, Shannon, what I'm saying essentially is that, look, we have spent money on an infrastructure. We have to maximize its use. There are some deficiencies in terms of the the construction part of it, but it is an investment that we have to utilize. And I think that concept of utilizing, and you know my views on St. Jude's.
Yeah.
I do not believe any infrastructure
should be abandoned
that has been created by the use of public funds should be abandoned.
Yeah.
Full stop. That's my position.
Fair enough.
Wherever it is. And that everything else that has been started, and I can start from the Human Resource Center that is at Union, that has been abandoned for the last 12 years or so. Let's finish it. The Human Resource Center at BZ, that was started almost 15 years ago, or under 15 years ago. Let's finish it. And you go through the entire island, and you see all of the projects that have been abandoned. Let us finish it. Because if you have spent money, public funds, those public funds should be maximized and utilized.
Yeah.
So that general principle. What I'm saying to you is that whatever has been built along that section of the roadway,
yeah.
and I think it has to be also dovetailed to whatever we're doing lower down.
Yeah.
Let us maximize its use. For the time being, what I would suggest is that we put the proper material, base material, on the widened areas, pave that entire width from shoulder or sidewalk to sidewalk. Later on, if you want to bring it to 2 lanes, to 4 lanes, we can do it later on. But for now, improve the running surface between Larry Tread and really Rodney Bay.
Yeah.
By the naval tower.
Naval thing, yeah. And that would bring some improvements as well. But just leaving it as is a stranded asset, and it's of no use right now. Definitely. You've reported, Mr. Peters, that your information is that the contractor cancelled.
My understanding is that the contractor did terminate the contract. I don't think that it was the other way around. I think the contractor terminated the contract.
On what basis?
That's my understanding.
On what?
On what basis? I don't recall what the basis was. But my understanding is that the contractor was the one who terminated the contract.
In that case, what's next? Based on your experience?
Well, in that case, what is next? I guess that there will be some negotiations with regards to the work done to date. Whether I don't know whether the termination was in fact valid, but that may be of no purpose at this point in time.
We'll only know when we have the basis for the termination. Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty certain that the contract would have indicated reasons for termination, and termination can form, most contracts, you have 3 forms of termination per se.
Yeah.
The contractor can terminate, the employer can terminate with cause, so the contractor can terminate with cause, the employer can terminate with clause, and the employer is also given that option of termination out of convenience. So there are 3 modalities of termination.
Yeah.
Termination by the contractor with cause, termination by the employer with cause, and termination by the employer for convenience.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 ways. And if the contractor terminated, he would have had to terminate with cause.
Of course.
So the only way he could have terminated legally is if the termination was with cause under the contract.
And based on your experience, he would have to be paid for what's on the ground and not the contract in its entirety.
No, he would have, if the termination,
it's a ticklish issue
with
there.
Clause, if the termination with clause has been upheld in a court of law, then he would be entitled to, and it would depend on the structure of the contract, he would be entitled to the value of work done today, as well as the possibility of loss of profit if the termination was by cause.
Which would amount to the full extent of the contract, the full amount or more.
No. He would only be paid for the value of work done to date. He would not be paid for the entire contract.
No, I'm saying you saying if it is that it is upheld that it was terminated by him with cause, he would be paid for what's on the ground and perceived losses. I'm saying those losses.
And perceived loss. Well, as I said, it depends on the form of contract that is used.
Yeah.
Some forms of contract, for example, what we call the FIDIC form of contract, if you terminate for a cause, meaning that there is in fact one of the factors that would create a situation where you can terminate. If one of those factors are in fact upheld, then the contractor is entitled to the payment for his work done to date, as well as the loss of profit that he would have that he would have not made under the contract. That's what the FIDIC form of contract would convey.
So that's what I'm saying. That might, when you do the accounts, they will do the accounts. That might as well just amount to the full extent of the contract or more.
No. It's a loss of profit. The profit doesn't equate to the rest of the value of the contract. So if the profit is estimated at, let's say the profit is 7%, or let's say 5%.
Yeah.
Then it would only relate to the value of outstanding work applied to that 5%.
Yeah,
that's how it is developed. Yeah.
Thanks for that clarification. Two more for me on Rodney Bay, and then we'll look at the project in its entirety to close. Rodney Bay, $15 million was the budget for this project. Adequate for you to do everything? The road widening, the sidewalks, the two roundabouts. $15 million.
Well, the $15 million was inclusive of the sidewalk, the drainage works, the base works, as well as the paving. It was the complete.
Everything, yes.
The complete, everything, yeah. Well, so I would only hope that the engineers within the ministry would have done that due diligence of the submission. I don't want to venture to comment on whether the 15 minutes is adequate, but I would want to believe and I would want to hope that the technical staff did the due diligence and would have looked at the scope of work, anticipated, and would have advised the minister to proceed with that particular contractual arrangement. So I reserve comment on the numbers, and I would want to believe that we would have to trust the civil servants that they would have done the job that they're being paid to do.
Yeah. Just to end on this one, based on your experience, the design, finance, build arrangements, once you have entered those figures in there, is there any opportunity to renegotiate or to increase the figures for whatever reason? So you've said that you can design it, you can build it for $15 million. Can anything change?
Only if the employer issues a variation instruction. That is one possibility that can occur. For example, if you have been given, because what happens really is that you start off with what is called the employer requirement. The employer says to the contractor, this is what I want. That is defined as the employer requirement. So, for example, if I have a design build to do, let's say, a 5-story building for housing, and the employer comes back and says, look, well, I want all of the units air-conditioned now, and I want gold-plated kitchen fixtures, then that instruction creates a variation, and that variation would have to be costed and added on to whatever was agreed upon as the design, construct, finance arrangement. So what is critical is the employer requirements. So at the start of the contract, the employer will fully define what it is I'm looking for. In this case, it would be saying, well, okay, I want all of the drainage done in this section to international standards. I want the road built to international standard. The specifications for the materials must be so, and those employer requirements would be defined within the contract. And that basically constitutes the responsibility of the contractor,
yeah.
And any variance from the employer requirements then creates a variation instruction.
Yeah. Let's interact with our audience a bit, Mr. Peters, and get some feedback from you on some questions coming in via the Facebook platform. Somebody's asking, would it cost us twice the original figure to complete the work at Rodney Bay because it was stopped and abandoned?
No, those numbers, no, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. As I said, the only major, additional cost, if I want to use that term, would be whether or not the contractor's termination by cause can stand legal scrutiny.
Yeah.
And if that is so, then the only factor that will have to be included would be the loss of profit of the remaining amount on the project. So if there were only 4 million remaining on the contract, per se, then the loss of profit would be the 5% of that 4 million would be the additional cost as it would. And that may be offset by more or a more competitive retendering of the goods. So if you move from a situation where you had a negotiated contract, which was, in this particular case, it was negotiated, if you move into a competitive environment, there are possibilities that in a competitive environment, your savings may offset any additional costs that would incur during the termination.
Yeah. But you don't anticipate anticipate any cost creep because of wear and tear. The project haven't been on the ground for over a year.
No, but as I said, the principal activities or the principal components of the project that still stand at this point in time would be the concrete works, the drainage works that were done, and the sidewalks that were done. I mean, and I know that they have constructed some of these median barriers that are stockpiled at this point in time. So, in terms of
you may have to go back on the base. You may have to go back on the base.
Well, the base, in my opinion, the base would not meet the specifications, and therefore there's nothing lost with the base, because the base material is the base material that I saw being placed there, in my opinion, would not meet the specifications for a base material in international standards. And I can use international standards like Road Note 31, which is used in tropical countries, which the ministry uses. That material would not meet the specifications of a base material that is approved by the Ministry of Infrastructure.
So we'd have to do it over again, according to you.
We would have. I mean, if I'm the ministry, I'm not paying for it, because if it is not in accordance with the employer requirements, then the employer has no commitment to pay for those works. Right? So follow me. When they are doing the analysis of the works that are done to date, that analysis would be in alignment with the specifications that constituted the contractual requirements of the contractor.
Yeah.
So the employer requirements would have spelled out what standard you ought to build. And if you have a situation where the contractor has not built to that standard, then there's no commitment on the part of the employer to pay for those works. Those works will be deemed rejected works, and the contractor will not be paid for those works.
I understand.
So, Mr. Shannon, you have me giving you tutorials in construction law.
that might be useful. That might be useful sometime down the line.
No problem, sir.
Definitely. So I guess it's a wait and see now to see how things progress with that particular section of road. But your recommendation is that you don't anticipate any increase in costs for Rodney Bay in particular because
But no, what I'm saying is that if the termination by cause can be upheld in law,
that's the only reason. I understand that. I understand that.
Then there may be additional costs associated in addition to the value of the works that are done to date.
Somebody's also asking about
the value of the done to date. I mean, that's it. The value of the works that are done to date that are in accordance with the employer requirements and the specifications that are outlined in the contractual document.
Yeah, fair enough. Somebody is also asking about the increase in the cost of materials that is used. Materials, according to the writer, have increased. That would add to the cost as well, you think, no?
Yeah, but the thing with materials, okay, in terms of the local materials, namely the crushed stone base, I do not believe that there has been significant movement in cost over the last year or so. So I don't think that our local quarry sector has any significant movement in terms of increases in cost. So that component, I believe, will be there. The only part will be the imported material, and that would be namely the increased cost of diesel and the increased cost of bitumen. But from what I have heard, bitumen prices post-COVID are coming back down. So they're stabilizing now. So there may be increases, there may not be increases in terms of changes in fluctuations in the cost of material.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Mr. Peter. And again, our phone lines remain open. If you want to come in on the discussion, the number to call is 4500-777, 4500-777. John Peters, former chief engineer, is my very special guest this morning. We're talking in infrastructure and the proposal to build a 4-lane highway from Shock up to Kazaba. We're talking about feasibility of that, the realistic options that are available to us given the financial constraints that we operate in, not just us, but we operate in and globally as well. These challenges really impact all of our decision making, not just in infrastructure, but elsewhere as well. So Mr. Peters is my special guest. We're discussing this particular project, and you can come in at any particular time to discuss and to join the discussion. So it has been said, Mr. Peters, it's been a fruitful discussion. I'll ask you a few more as we wind on. But to reiterate, your suggestion is that there still needs to be a full analysis, a full assessment to guide the decision-making process moving forward, even before any more loans are signed off on.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that.
Mr. Peters, just hold on for me. Just hold on for me, and let's feed a call on the air. We'll also put in the monitor so Mr. Peters can hear the call as well. Good morning. Welcome to the platform.
Good morning, Shannon.
Morning.
How are you?
Not too bad.
Good. I've got a question. Good morning, Mr. Peters. I've got a question for you. In terms of the Rodney Bay contract, the last contractors, didn't they have a fixed cost? Because you see, what you're saying is confusing. My understanding, in fact, I'm asking, didn't they have a fixed cost to build that road, whether or not the price of materials went up? And as the contract has been stopped, and there may be a new contractor, wouldn't the whole contract change in that with the price of everything, all the materials going up around the world, shipping into St. Lucia, etc., wouldn't that make a drastic change in the cost of finishing this road?
Caller, Mr. Peters.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Well, as I said before, without having sight of all the numbers, one particular contract was on a sole selective tendering process, meaning that one contractor was called, give me a price, negotiated, and moved on. If you move into a competitive environment, I'm saying that there are possibilities that you would have better prices than whatever was presented by the contractor in a non-competitive sole selective tendering process. So it is not a given that if the government pursues the completion of the work with another contractor, that it is a given that there is in fact going to be a significant increase in price, namely in relation to the cost of material. I also said that while I would accept that there has been a fluctuation in prices over the years, those fluctuations relate primarily to the imported materials related to road construction, namely bitumen and diesel. The local material, the local aggregate, as far as I have seen, there has not been significant movement in the cost of a local aggregate, and the impacts that may have been felt in imported material have not been translated into the local construction sector in relation to materials generated within the island. So, point number one, she is correct. If it was a fixed cost contract, and if there were no fluctuation clauses included within the contract, then the sum that was entered into an agreement with the contractor holds. If we have a situation now where the government decides to use another contractor, I'm saying that because you have moved into a competitive environment, it is not a given that the cost of the project to completion will be significantly more than what was presently negotiated.
Caller, are you still there?
That's my response.
Yes, I'm still on. So I've got another question for Mr. Peters. Why was the contract stopped if the government knew? I mean, I'm not a contractor, Mr. Peters, but obviously I know that if I stop building something a year ago or a year and 3 months or 2 months ago, and now it has been open to the weather, etc., that when I come back to build it, especially using another contractor, and with the price of all goods going up, obviously it's going to cost me more. Why was this project stopped? That is a question I can't seem to get an answer to. I do not know that you can furnish us with that. So can you please? I'll listen to you off air. Thank you. Thanks.
I'm not sure you were the one who stopped. I'm not sure you were the one who stopped the project.
The contract terminated the works to begin with. So if you call that stop, yes, but stop because of the contractor terminating the project. And even before the contractor's termination, the minister did say that the project was being stopped for 45-day review. That's correct.
A 45-day review.
From my recollection, yes, there was in fact an instruction given that the project would be stopped, and there was a reevaluation of the works going forward. And I understand that during that period of review, that the contractor terminated the contract. That's my understanding of the part.
Yeah. Thanks for that. We have another caller. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning, Sheldon.
Morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Peters. A question for Mr. Peters.
Good morning.
First of all, from my understanding, the ministry stopped the project initially, first of all. Of course, like you said, the ministry had 45 days in which it said it would carry out its review. Did the ministry carry out its review, and did the ministry give instructions to the contractor to start immediately after those 45 days? I believe the answer to that is no. The ministry, of course, on contract had about 80 days in which it could, maximum in which it could stop the project. Upon the 80-day period, what I do understand was that from my perspective, of course, I'm not the contractor, I'm just speaking from knowledge of information that may have been in the public, that the that the contractor did write to the ministry after the 80 days or 85 days period, which is the maximum amount of time, requesting that they recommence the project. There was no reply from the ministry until then. Then there was an announcement made on air that the project will recommence in January of this year, without the ministry writing to the contractor or even inviting the contractor to a forum to discuss and to say, we are going to re-engage you on the project. After that was said on public air, then after 139 or 140 days, the ministry wrote the contractor, asking the contractor to proceed back on the site. However, that letter had many conditions in that the contractor could only go in and work to block up for safety reasons, to block up the manholes that were uncovered, and to do any changes the ministry would require to the drainage works. The contractor was forbidden. The works, when it comes to working on the carriageway, working on the median, working on the light, working on the overpass, which is all part of the contract, the contractor was said he cannot touch any of those projects. So obviously, the contractor would have to take a very calculated decision. Am I going to go and mobilize resources? Am I going to go and put back staff there? Am I going to go and works on that project simply to do a portion of the works? The works, therefore, was never fully opened by the ministry for the contractor to do. And of course, under those circumstances, I understand the contractor realizing that he had cause to terminate because the ministry did not hold to its 80 days, terminated the contract. Now, if indeed the contractor has terminated the contract with cause, right? Apart from the ministry, of course, like you rightly said, would have to pay for loss of profits and so on. The ministry, there's works on the ground, and that project was a design finance bill project in which the ministry had commenced payments. There is a value of works on the ground. We all agree for that purpose. However, the ministry has taken the draconian step in terminating or stopping the payments on that project. They did not carry out payments on that project. Wouldn't that move mean, therefore, that there would be interest to be paid to that contractor, in addition to the loss of profits? And of course, like a caller rightly said, you are going to engage a new contractor. The supply chain issues, we know the cost of building materials around the world, in some cases is double. Wouldn't it cost the people of St. Lucia a lot more money, therefore, to be able to proceed in engaging a new contractor? And obviously that $15 million could very well go all the way 20-something or double. I'll listen to you, and after that I have a follow-up question.
Mr. Peters?
Okay, Shannon, I didn't hear much of it because it was a little bit muffled on my end. Obviously, the caller seems to have a greater body of information on the project than I have. As I said, all that I'm aware of is that the contractor did terminate the contract, and that would have been in sometime in 2021, towards the end of 2021. And as I said, no, what I shared to you...
That would not be... I think you just mix up the dates, Mr. Peters. You say in 2021. I don't think that would have been correct.
If we are in 2022...
Yeah?
If we are in 2022, Shannon,
yeah,
I can assure you that the contract was terminated in 2020.
My slip.
Okay, all right. Yeah, as I said, I didn't hear much of what the caller was saying, but obviously he seems to have a greater body of information on the project than I have.
Repeat what I've said,
all I can say is that my understanding is that the contractor terminated sometime towards the end of 2021.
Mr. Peters,
I guess the Ministry of Infrastructure is better placed to answer some of those questions that...
Just caller, your latter part of your contribution, which was the question, I think that would be the part that we missed out.
Okay, so in summary, I've said that let's run it up. From my perspective, let's assume that the contractor has terminated with cause.
Yeah.
The ministry did stop the project. The ministry did not keep to the maximum period of days in which it could terminate the project. The contractor wrote after the 80-something days telling the ministry it wants to continue. The ministry did not reply. The ministry then went on national radio and television announcing that the project would start in January of this year, 2022. After they did that, then wrote to the contractor, telling the contractor to proceed on site and to work only to do safety work, cover manholes, and if they need any changes in drainage, they would do that. The contractor was never given permission by the ministry to do the substantive work, which is to work on the carriageway, the median barriers, the paving, the roundabouts, the lights to be placed, neither the overpass, and so on. And there are 2 overpasses, I think, Shannon, that is part of that cost. Right? Having done that, I believe the contractor, realizing it is not profitable for him to proceed on the project, decided to terminate. And of course, let's assume that termination is with cause.
As I said, I can't comment on the gentleman's proposition. All I can say to you, as I've said before, my understanding is that the contractor terminated the contract sometime towards the end of 2021.
Yeah.
The ministry.
Yes. And that was after 139 or 145 days in which they were stopped on.
One second, caller. One second, caller.
I am not in a position to do that.
1 second, caller.
I don't think it makes sense pursuing that discourse.
This is a breakfast discourse, so we have sufficient time. Let's take time and enjoy the breakfast, caller. So, Mr. Peters, what he's saying, if I follow the caller, from the information that he has, it appears to him that the contractor may have terminated with cause. That is what he's saying. So he's saying, given that, wouldn't he also be paid interest? Am I right, caller? Is that your question?
That's correct. In addition to the ministry, in addition to the project being terminated, just hold on. Let me come on the issue. Let me come on the issue of interest. This is a design, finance, build project. The ministry, of course, is entitled to pay the contractor.
I didn't hear the question.
Ministry commenced payments. The ministry commenced payments, and immediately after the contractor terminated, the ministry stopped payments. Obviously, there is work done on the ground of which the ministry could have evaluated and continue payment. I am saying, in addition to what Mr. Peters has said, if there is termination with cause, the contractor rightfully will be entitled to loss of profits, okay, including the works that have not been done. Wouldn't that contractor be entitled to interest payments? The very fact that the work is on the ground and the payments as per the schedule in the contract have not been met by the ministry.
Hold on. Mr. Peters, did you hear that? Mr. Peters, are you with us? Mr. Peters is on the floor.
No, I'm not hearing, but as I said, Shannon, the caller, if it is the same caller as online, all I will say to you is that he seems to have a body of information that I don't have. It is pointless pursuing this discussion because the Ministry of Infrastructure is the best placed entity to obtain and to provide clarification on those matters that he's raising. So I have nothing more to say on that.
Yeah,
that scope.
Fair enough, caller. So we can't press Mr. Peters any further. If you have another contribution.
Fine. Mr. Peters, let's go on the issue. You said that you've looked at the piece, you've looked at the material that has been used there on the project, and you realize it is not good. Mr. Peters, did you carry out an independent test, a lab test on the materials that were used for you to come and make that statement, or is it just a visual assessment?
Did you hear that latter question, Mr. Peters? Yes or no?
No, Shannon, I repeat again.
No, the caller has moved on. So you're saying you no longer want to engage with the caller?
I'm not hearing the caller. Sorry?
You're saying you no longer want to engage with this particular caller, or you're not hearing him? What is the issue?
Okay. I am not hearing your comments, Shannon. You're in and out. If it is the same caller that started the conversation, I'm saying to you, it is pointless pursuing this discussion because obviously he has a body of information.
You have said, Mr. Peters, as a civil engineer, as a professional, Mr. Peters, you have said that the materials being used as the base is not good and will have to be excavated and not paid by the ministry. For you to have made that assessment, Mr. Peters, I am simply asking you, have you as a professional simply done a visual assessment, or did you confirm that by carrying out lab tests?
Over here for me. Caller, please hold.
All right. I can say to you that I'm aware of the source of the material. I'm aware of the properties of the material from that particular source. And I can assure you, I say again, without any iota of doubt in my mind, that that material will not stand up to the scrutiny of a specification that is of an international standard. That's it. And that's my position. As I said, I'm entitled to a position, and I'm saying to you, I know the source of the material, I know the properties of the material, I know the properties required of a base material of international standard, and I have no doubt in my mind, not one iota of doubt in my mind, that that material placed there does not meet international standards for a base material. Yeah. And we can close off that discussion, Shannon, on that score.
Thank you, caller. Thanks so much for calling in. Thank you. I know you're very passionate about it as well, but this platform, we want to preserve the high-end quality and standard. We don't want people to quarrel. I think there's sufficient time, and we could always have allotted you additional time. But it's a passionate discussion, caller. We don't fault you. But Mr. Peters has answered, saying that it is his opinion that the base material he's assuring you will not meet the international specifications. We'll also do our investigation here as well, but that's Mr. No, we could allow the caller to go. We could let this particular caller go as we wind down. Just about 10 minutes left. We've been on air, Mr. Peters, from 6, and a few minutes to go. All of a sudden, boy, my AC seemed to have blown away. It's now extremely hot.
Oh my! No problem, Shannon. I'll take 1 or 2 before I leave.
Yeah.
It's longer than I thought.
Yeah. One more from me on the design, finance, build approach. Can you open that up to competitive bidding? Would you get?
Yes, it can. Yeah. It can. That has been done before in several jurisdictions within the Caribbean. That you have had competitive tendering processes in a design, build, finance arrangement.
Okay. All right. So that would be interesting to find out if in fact when the project resumes, if the administration goes to open it up, or if it would be another direct award. But just to wrap up, Rodney Bay, it was $15 million, and the contractor had committed to completing the works with $15 million. There was a timeline as well. It has since been stopped. We need some clarification from the ministry. It's a while since they've spoken to me, so hopefully this can reignite our good old relationship. Their clarification on this particular issue and the move forward in completion of what's at Rodney Bay and the proposal that's been touted by Senior Minister King to return to the Kuwaitis and fund the four-lane highway construction. Mr. Peters, your final words, recommendations, suggestions, and for people who may have joined us late, what is your advice as we try to find a solution to the problems on the Castries Gros Islet Highway, now termed the Sir Julian R. Hunt Highway?
Right. But as in summary to the various discussions we have had this morning, which I agree with you, I enjoyed sharing my thoughts with you and the country at large. One, I would say that the government pursues discussions with the Kuwait Fund for that loan, and that loan be focused primarily on our back roads. Back roads of importance would be the Vesikri Road, the road from Montchi to Plateau as a critical link, and what's the third one we looked at? Montchi there. All right, and well, there's a third one.
The Larry Chet Vesikri Road.
We looked at Vesikri. We looked at Montchi going to Plateau.
Yeah.
to the back there.
And there was another one from basically going down to Corin Granivier there.
Correct, yeah. and basically going down to Asukana. Yeah. So that is important. Two, that we consider the low-hanging fruits on interventions on the Gros Islet Highway, namely looking at the various intersections, some to be completely shut off and some to be widened. That's there. Third, to look at one, let's say, an updated study, which would create some of those conclusions that I am proposing now, but I still would want it to be substantiated by a proper transportation engineering study. Yeah. So that should be done. So we start with the study and let the study inform the interventions in the short term, deem the low-hanging fruits, pursue the loan, focus there first on the improvement of the back roads and the roads we spoke of. The third thing, that intervention that was done between Rodney Bay to Key Largo, Larry Thread Junction, I would throw that into the mix of the transportation study. In the interim, I think the government should pursue the paving of that section of the road, and then think again as to whether we want to create 2 lanes or just leave it as 2 significantly sized or properly sized lanes with shoulders, paved shoulders going down into the north of the island at this point in time. An overarching principle, I would say, is that infrastructure that has been built, as far as possible, should be integrated going forward, and that any policy of demolition and abandoning of infrastructure that are started should not be pursued by any administration.
Thanks,
so those are the overarching points I want to leave with you and your guest. Shannon, thank you very much for this opportunity. And anytime again, you can give me a shout.
Yeah, you know, it's always a pleasure for us to have you. Whenever you come on, it's always a fresh start and a good start to the day. So thanks for joining us this morning.
That's a play on words there, brother.
My good friend, take care.
No problem, Shannon. It's always a joy. Thanks very much. Bye-bye to all.
Bye-bye. Former Chief Engineer, Mr. John Peters. My very special guest this morning talking infrastructure. I'll get the contract which was signed between the Infrastructure Ministry and Fresh Start. Contract since been terminated. I'll get it to share with you. We're also in discussions and in contact with Mr. Felicia and his team. So the discussion will happen, and we continue to hold and open our doors, our arms to the good Ministry of Infrastructure to come on and clarify the various issues. You're well oiled as well to do so. So we await your feedback at convenience to you. Stay with us. Up next, we present to you the word of the day, which will wrap up the morning's program. The word of today is brought to you the kind compliments of Joby antibacterial washing powder, distributed in Indonesia by Fruit Seafood Limited. My family, my love, my Joby, the proud sponsors of the word for the day, which comes on screen right now. I hope DeAndre helps me out. Bet. Animal is a noun. DeAndre smiles. Département la faux j'avais timoun pour pas tuer bet mawan avant festin journée créole. Bet, today's word, animal, in keeping with our celebration observance of Creole Heritage Month. DeAndre is not assisting me. He's supposed to be my Creole advisor on the morning show. Département la faux j'avais timoun pour pas tuer bet mawan avant festin. Pachaché. Yeah, that's what I said. Pachaché, no? I said tree? Oh. Département la faux j'avais timoun pour pachaché bet mawan avant festin journée créole. The Department of Forestry has advised persons against hunting wild animals ahead of the journée créole festivities. Thanks so much. It has been an exceptional program. I thank you for your viewership and thank you for staying with us throughout the morning. We get off at 6 o'clock and there is no knowing when things will just get hot and steamy. on the morning show. Good morning, St. Lucia. Special hello and hi to our friends in New York City, Mr. Patrick Smith. Blessed day to you, the management and staff here at Hot 7. We wish you all a fantastic day. We'll be back, God willing, 6 a.m. tomorrow to conclude the week already. Free Up Friday. My name is Shannon LeBon. Have yourselves a good one. Continue to take good care of yourselves and each other.
Hot 7 TV is the rising star of television in St. Lucia with our stunning 100% HD quality, fresh exciting programming, including a balanced professional newscast. We are now the fastest growing TV station in all time slots on cable. Additionally, over 10,000 households carry our plug and play antennas. Our mobile app has over 11,000 users locally and over 300,000 users worldwide. Keyword to find our free app in the App Store is Caribbean Hot FM. Swipe once for Kiss FM. Swipe twice for Hot 7 TV. It's compatible with both Android and Apple handsets. Go ahead, share the app, and share the most talked about TV station in St. Lucia. Hot 7 TV, for the viewer and the advertiser. It just makes sense. We watch trending. Hot 7 TV. Catch us on channel 117 Flow, channel 7 Plug and Play, or our website www.caribbeanhot7tv.com and our popular Hot FM app.
To advertise on Hot 7 TV, call us at 452-6040 or email us at hot7@caribbeanhottv.com. A fantastic package awaits you.
We'll be right back after this break on Hot 7 TV. And now, for the Hot 7 top of the hour news note.
Dr. Mull Clark has highlighted the need for people to stay active amid the prevalence of non-communicable diseases. The chances of developing lifestyle illness such as high blood pressure and diabetes can be drastically reduced with diet and exercise, as well as proper amounts of sleep and hydration. The message comes amid heightened sensitization during Cancer Awareness Month, which is observed annually in October. As the world slowly crawled out of lockdown and infection prevention and control mode due to the emergence of COVID-19, Dr. Clark highlights that there has always been a heavy